demonstrating a different and more equitable labor model in the midst of this capitalist society. You already know we are a vegan restaurant. Go ahead and get something to eat, something to drink, to enjoy during our conversation. Make sure if colleagues give you a number, that you have your order number ready, or that you have your table thing there so that you can get your meal. On the other side of what I call the magic bookstore, you already know what that's about. 13,500 books calling your name. Plenty of things to get into, many things which dovetail and intersect very importantly with tonight's conversation. So I'll make sure that you have time after we adjourn our conversation to get all up in it and get some things to go along with tonight's books. The Baltimore Free School Classroom. How many of you have ever taken a workshop or been in a meeting down in the Free School Classroom? Just curious. Good handful of you. Fantastic. Make sure you utilize that. If you want to propose space usage, maybe there's something you want to do there, or maybe in the main space, you go to redevils.org. redevils.org. Go to the bottom of the homepage. You'll see a doc to fill out to propose space usage. Make sure that you are telling your family and friends that they can purchase online, because we are very fortunate to be in this community here. Not everybody around the country has a radio. All right, just to make an understatement. So you need to let them know they actually, at the very least, if they can't be here in person with us, they can certainly get the books, they can get swag, have us available to you within the U.S. And of course, you can go to the website to see all of the upcoming events pop up every week. Too many for me to name in detail, but I do want to at least remind you that tomorrow night, so we're going to be into some very heavy stuff tonight, to make an understatement. So you ought to come tomorrow night for something a lot more fun and lighter. Jamie and Grant and Jack Harris and Pete Tyler present Cake for Dummies. Yes, you heard me correct. Cake for Dummies. That's going to be tomorrow at 7 p.m. That ought to be an interesting and enjoyable conversation. Then Saturday, very importantly, many of you familiar with Project Censor, Good Conscience Media Project. Project Censor will present the State of the Free Press 2026. That will be as the 50th anniversary edition, in fact, in conversation with Mickey Huff, Richard Jerry Collins, Max Alvarez, Allison Butler, Eleanor Goldfield. Those are just two of the many things, so you definitely want to be sure, again, to check the website and come on through. This is a topic that does not need extra laboring. Many of us in this room are directly impacted and affected by this topic. As you'll hear my sister Wanda say shortly, there's a family that we didn't particularly want to be in, of folk who are directly impacted by police murder and police brutality. In the case of my nephew in 2007, the case of Tawan's brother in 2013. And there's so much that can be said about it. But despite the overt evil of it, the shenanigans, the games that are played, all right, are as much a part of it as anything else. And if you've been following the news, there's been a lot of energy around pushing for the release of the coroner's reports. Why do we have to even push so hard in the first place to even get the reports released? What is the role of the coroner's office in trying to prosecute police brutality and things of this nature? We're going to get into all of that this evening. Terrence Keel is an award-winning scholar, the founding director of the Biocritical Studies Lab, and a professor of human biology, society, and African American studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. The author of Divine Variations. By the way, this sounds fascinating. I want to do a whole other talk about this coming up. Divine Variations, How Christian Thought Became Racial Science. And is the co-editor of Critical Approaches to Science and Religion, fellowships from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Russell Sage Foundation, NIH. So much more to say about Terrence. We are also joined this evening by Ahmed Ragab, who is an historian, physician, and documentary filmmaker, and the founding director of the independent group, the Center for Black, Brown, and Queer Studies. Is that based here in the area? Where is it? Right here, Paul. Okay. and co-founder of Pinwheel Productions, a film production studio dedicated to supporting Black, brown, and queer artists and stories. Degrees from Cairo University and Nicole Patrick. They hold études in Paris. I just revealed how beautiful and non-existent my friendship is today. Family smart. This is right. Let's just say that. Always glad to be joined by my dear sister in the struggle, my dear sister in that aforementioned fortunate family that I spoke of in 2013. Tyrone West was literally beaten to death and suffocated to death on the northeast side of Baltimore. His sister, Tawanda Jones, has been organizing since then to call the police state to account and to hold it to its accountability. Her group, West Wednesdays, has organized every week. Let me say it again, every week since then. And the energy and the leadership that she has put out is much appreciated by folk, not only throughout Baltimore, but throughout the country. There's so much more to say about Tawanda. I want you to go to the website so that you can read her complete bio. The books are right here with me. I have plenty more than these. So what you do want to do is come over when I talk so that you can make sure you have your copy. If you pay with a card, if you pay with cash, we'll take care of that in the bookstore. The coroner silence, death records, and the hidden victims of police violence. I need us to make some real radical roof-raising venomous noise for Ahmed Regal, Tawanda Jones, and Terrence Hugh.
So I want to first say just thank you to Red Nose and to Tawanda and to Ahmed for hosting us and having this conversation. It is a real honor to share this work with the world. There are so many impacted families, there are so many organizations, there are so many people who were responsible for making this work happen. I want to shout out to one of these people. This is Dr. Carmen Johnson sitting in front of me right now. If you don't know her, she is a political force of nature. We've done some really powerful, impactful work around custody death here in the state of Maryland, which we will get into in a minute. But I just wanted to set the stage by saying just sort of thank you for everyone for being here. I think you want to kick us off, I believe, with some questions, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you again to them, and thank you all for being here. This is a book that I think everyone in this country needs to read. It is an essential reading. It allows us to think differently about the world we live in. Many in our communities are affected by these issues, but at the same time, even then, reading it and understanding how what goes around in the hidden holes of the justice system is really important. So thank you so much, Terrence, for doing this. It's always been a pleasure and an honor to be Terrence's friend for a long time. And I want to kick us off by asking you, tell us a little bit about the journey of writing this book. Why did you decide to write the book? How did you make this decision and the journey that led to this book right here?
So there are a few reasons why I wrote this book. One is the death of George Floyd was a very public moment for all of us to watch his public execution. And if you remember George Floyd's death, at the very center of it was his autopsy. The Hennepin County medical examiner wrote that it was a homicide. But if you look at the primary cause of death, and I'm going to quote, the coroner said, cardiopulmonary arrest complicating law enforcement subdual. That's literally what it said. So I read that and I said, well, what does that mean? Well, what it meant was that George Floyd had a bad heart. His heart sent him into cardiac arrest. Because his heart sent him into cardiac arrest, police had a hard time subduing him. That's what he done. In other words, George Floyd is to blame for his own death. Now, all of you are shaking your head. I was shaking my head when I read this. This is a staggering betrayal of the people. It's a staggering betrayal of democratic accountability. How could this position, supposedly of truth and justice and science and objectivity, say something like this? All of us saw with our own eyes exactly what happened. Derek Chauvin killed him. The other officers killed him. What that death record should say at the very top of the line, officers subdued him to death. But it didn't. So then I got me curious, how many more George Floyds are there? And when I started asking that question, I started getting connected with families and communities and organizations in Los Angeles, in the Bay Area, in Texas, here in the state of Maryland. Unfortunately, there are far too many George Floyds than we realize. And even worse, many of the people who die in police custody, we will never know them. So I created a research team, a laboratory investigating this issue, and what we found out is that between 2000 and 2020, over a 20-year period, there were 32,104 people killed during arrests here in the United States. Now, think about this figure. It doesn't include people dying in jail. It doesn't include people dying in prisons. Another way to think about this, every day 5 people die under state custody, but we are only going to know the names of 3 of those people. So there's a massive amount of people losing their lives that we are never going to know about. Another figure to think about, 32,104 people died in 20 years. We have executed 16,000 people since the founding of the nation in 1608. Okay? But just in a 20-year period, police have killed more than twice the number of people we have executed in this country. Wow. So what does that mean? It means that dying in custody has become the new form of capital punishment. Dying in custody has become a way that we are taking people's lives before they go in front of a judge, before they go in front of the court system, before they have an opportunity to defend themselves. And the component of our criminal justice movement right now, criminal justice reform, Black Lives Matter reform, it's all important. We need to be thinking about all these different levels of holding police accountable. But what we have not been thinking about is that the medical examiner and coroner plays a massive role in allowing police to take people's lives. Because if they can murder George Floyd and the entire world can see it, and still write on his death record, his heart was the reason why he died. Imagine what happens when people are dying in custody and there is no body cam footage. There isn't Darnell Frazier with a cell phone recording the details. There isn't a reporter saying the same. And time again, through the work over the last 5 years, we've discovered that so many people who've been lost in the system, and there's no record.
Joanna, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say, living through that, like, personally being affected by when my brother Tyrone West was brutally executed in Northeast Baltimore, beat to death by 17 plus, like up to 20 officers, I'm talking about, pulled out by his dreads, pepper spray, tased, torture, right? In broad daylight, smothered to death, and then if that wasn't enough, a Morgan State officer, literally 340-pound man, while my brother was in a hard-time position, face down, you know, gasping, as witness said, he was gasping like a fish out of water, for breath, for life, and they had David Lewis to finish him off, like there are children, with his knee and my brother's neck, and all that weight in his back. But my whole point is, when it happened to my brother, they took 154 days just to give us an autopsy report. I knew it was gang. Like literally, they hit my brother body shots for 5 days. Even when, first of all, I never got the call saying, oh, your brother died, he had your vehicle, your teacher ID badge is hanging up in the car, registration, he had his ID on him and everything. But long story short, the corruption is so real to the point that literally, I'm playing investigator from day one when I got a bad feeling in my body, something went right when I started calling him. So I immediately became the investigator. But that being said, they know that my brother was killed in such a horrible way, and they hit his body, and they wouldn't even listen to the family or to the funeral home. Like we paid for that. Like when we finally found out about it, literally. They say, we go down to the medical exams up, they're like, well, this is not Mark's funeral home, you can't see your lover. And I'm like, why not? And they was like, well, you get a funeral home of your choosing, we did all that. man, the same day, all that, and they was like, well, have your funeral home will come get his body, will transport it, and you can see your brother there. Literally, when my funeral home called me and said, Miss Jones, something weird going on, they're not releasing the body. So I'm like, what do you mean they're not releasing my brother's body? He said, they don't deliver bodies on a weekend. He said, we've never heard of such thing. We've been in this business for over 40 plus years. We've never heard of such. And I'm like, so immediately I knew something wasn't right. And for me to have to go through everything that I read and uncovered, it took me literally 2.5 weeks to read this book because I had to read it in spurts because crying and just like, oh my God, that was me. And then they said, my brother, they literally, after everything came out, they gave a 7-page forensic autopsy stating that my brother died from cardiac arrest, like he had a bad heart. The officers that beat him had to didn't kill him. He died from a bad heart, which I knew that wasn't the truth. And literally, I had to, that day when we went to go see him at the funeral home, here it is, my brother's body is escorted again by the killers that killed him. Like, police, he's dead. You're transporting him 5 days later with heavy police. I knew something wasn't right, so I convinced them to let me go back there to pray with my brother. I had to come up with something quick. I need to have my final goodbye. Things like we ain't clean his body, I don't care, like, give me gloves. I need to have his final say so, my brother. And immediately, like, when you can't go back there, you can only take 2 people. I picked the biggest uncles I had in my family, took them back there with me. My aunts were getting back, they don't know what I'm doing. But I filmed, they beat my brother so bad, like, boot prints and stuff all on his back, like you say, baton, everything. And then the autopsy said only thing he had was an abrasion on his forehead, and he died of a bad heart. And they took my brother's healthy heart out of his body, they wanted to send it out to test it. And I had to literally go in my pocket and get my brother's body and send $50,000. Like, you're not gonna lie on my brother. I'm sorry for taking so much time, but it's so painful and traumatic. And I just thank you guys.
Well, thank you for I just want to say that it is a tragedy that happened to you and your family and your brother. And even worse, there are so many families, so many impacted families who have the same story. And this is a system that's hiding in plain sight. It's a system that is completely unaccountable to the people, to the public, that it's supposedly supposed to support and serve. Coroners and medical examiners are thought to be objective, value-neutral people who aren't involved in politics. But everything you've described tells me that's a political story. That's the coroner covering for law enforcement. That's the coroner covering for the elected officials that appointed the coroner. That's the coroner covering for the local government who knows this is happening, and the lawmakers who fight efforts to change all this.
100%. It's disgusting. Even when I got my brother's body exhumed, the coroner from out of town said, oh my God, pray for somebody literally went so far to pretend they were me and told the coroner down there in a whole other state. In Texas, they said, this is Miss Jones, I'm letting you know, I'm gonna send a team of doctors down there with my brother's body. Why in the world would I do that if I'm trying to seek the truth? Why would I send doctors here around the street? So they were really trying to do everything to cover up their corruption. And when I told him, he's like, what you trying to get me in trouble? You said the doctors know. I said, I would never, that was not me. I said, what number did they call you from? He said, they blocked it. He said, oh my God, my sister prayed for me. And he was scared. And after that, he caught retaliation. They waited until he was literally ready to resign, and they poured it up on him about some foolishness, all because he was a thorough, transparent doctor.
Wanda, you've done so much work in Baltimore to make people aware of all these things that are happening. And not build on this and just turns the book, you dedicate the book for all of the misremembered victims of police violence. And chapter 4, which is titled Collecting Fragments, takes us through this journey of how you think about how you collect the information, how you get to the story. You started by saying the American historian Saidia Hartman once explained that recovering the lives of enslaved Black women using records written by their captors was like telling an impossible story. These stories were impossible because they required more imagination, compassion, and agency than what the archive would allow. So I want to ask you if you can tell us more about how you collected these fragments, how you collect these stories, and how can we make these misremembered families and misremembered stories remembered?
So what we did is we were working in states where autopsies were part of the public record. And what that means is that if you live in the state of Maryland, or you live in the state of California, or you live in the state of Texas, any member of the public can request for a record of someone who died in custody. And this is a law. The idea is that the people, we, all of us in this room, have a responsibility and a obligation to look over the shoulder of the coroner and the police to make sure they got it right. Well, what I learned doing this work is that law enforcement and coroners can hide records. They can deny access to those records, which is what happened to you, Tony. They can do things like discard evidence, like the vital organs that are taken out of people's bodies that show evidence of the violence. Law enforcement can also redact the medical record. We were working in California and we began doing this work and we were publishing reports exposing the corruption in Los Angeles. Once the medical examiner got word of our work, they started redacting the records, blacking out entire sections that were crucial for us to understand. The other part of this quote, it's about how this record is not really designed to honor a life. It's not really designed to tell the final story of someone. It's designed to cover for the police and to cover for the state. Yeah. And so what that means is that you read these records and there are things in there that seem completely irrelevant to why this was done. I've read records where they mention someone's pre-existing health condition without actually citing a doctor or a physician to justify that. I've read records where cops said the person appeared to be on PCP, and then you look at the toxicology report and there are no drugs in their system. I've read records where the person is described as non-compliant, disruptive, and then you later learn they were given multiple medications that created an adverse reaction inside them, and that the police saw that adverse reaction as a threat or a sign of aggression. And so these records are a fragment of life. These records are designed to misremember, to sort of change the way that we think about people who are on the other side of the law. And I think this is something that, Carmen, you told me lots of times. People on the other side of the wall are often forgotten, discarded, misremembered, as if they don't matter, as if they don't count. That is true with these records. These records are written as if they don't ever expect the public to read them. And when they do read them, they're designed to convince you this person deserves to die. This person was going to die anyways because they had a bad heart or they had a mental health condition. And tragically, what that means is that we have a system that's not interested in actually being accountable. Why are police taking people's lives? We have a criminal justice system for a reason. I want to live in a state, in a society, in a nation where if someone does find themselves on the wrong side of the law, we can talk about that a little bit more, I want them to have the opportunity to defend themselves in the court of law. I want to have them have the opportunity to be released free. I don't want anyone dying in custody. I don't want anyone dying before they go in front of this criminal justice system. And these records are a way to sort of maintain this unjust, anti-democratic system.
I want to build on this and look at chapter 5, which is titled Perishing. And in there, you take us into a journey of how the system is essentially rigged, and it's done in a particular way that there's almost no way of accounting for all this. So I'm going to read this code. Violent police encounters, by their very nature, create environments that are physically and emotionally hostile. To apply the but-for principle in an in-custody death requires investigators to recognize law enforcement encounters as hostile. These investigators, however, are reluctant to define police encounters as explicitly antagonistic, and rarely are they explicit in the reports about the application of the but-for principle in natural death cases involving law enforcement. Can you say a little bit more about the but-for principle and the importance of recognizing the nature of police encounters for Black and brown people?
So that quote is trying to draw readers' attention to a problem with natural deaths under state custody. All right, so what's a natural death? Most of us in this room, when we finally leave this earth, we will probably leave in old age because of an illness or disease. That's called a natural death. So a natural death is a death that is something that would have occurred regardless of the environmental circumstance. So when a medical examiner gets the body of someone who died in police custody, they're supposed to ask the question, would this person have died if not for the presence of police and law enforcement? What very often happens is that if law enforcement and police pepper spraying, subduing you, tasing you on top of the pepper spray, threatening to end your life, that spikes stress hormones, puts the body in fight or flight response, and puts stress on minds, hearts, brains, and souls. Literally, your physiology changes when you're in the presence of police. And it certainly changes if you're black, or you're poor, or you're a person of color. And you know, cops can take your life and the DA is going to defend the police. You're literally facing death. Right? So how can you die naturally in that context or in that environment?
Right.
It's not the same as being on a hospital bed at the end of your life, connected to an IV with a physician looking over top of you. We're talking about people being executed on the street, people dying in jails. And so what I wanted to do in that chapter, in that section, is to say, we cannot accept the lie that people die naturally in police custody. We cannot accept the lie that you can die naturally in jail, on a jail cell, or in prison. We can't die naturally because of that. If we die in those contexts, it's because of the police. And we need to have the moral clarity and the political clarity to connect the actions of law enforcement to the ending of people's lives. Going back to George Floyd, going back to your brother would still be with us if not the police.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to add on to the conversation, because there was a young man here that died. His name was George King. He was only 21. He went to Good Sam's Hospital. They called the county police on him because he thought, he was in a bunch of pain, and of course he felt like, oh my goodness, like God not trying to help me. And they called the county police, and they came and they pepper sprayed him, and they tased him 4 times a night, and he died. But they were following that he died from natural causes. Like, that wasn't nothing natural about that. They were taser 4 times in his neck. Like, it's ridiculous. And that's why we started WestWednesday protesting every week, demanding answers. We started at the coroner's office, state's attorney's office, all the way up to the coroner's office. Like, really marching, protesting, and calling them our week after week. So in the sense of when David Fowler was an expert witness on the stand in George Floyd case, I was so mad because so many people that knew I was around the world in the club that I'm fighting for everybody, not just for our big brothers, because these are not isolated incidents as they would happen. These are systemically happening, that's happening all around the world. It's everywhere. So every time they want to interview me about Tom West, no, you want to interview Anthony Anderson's family first, this one, I'm not alone in this, that type of thing. But when he threw himself under the bus and said, George Floyd died from everything, gas, everything besides Derek Shelton with me, and when that black doctor, the forensic doctor from DC, had told all the doctors, like something like got all the doctors to sign, and that's what got my brother kids looked into. In a bunch, and it should have been way more, but the thing, and I'm just thankful for that, because it's like you'll fight for something peacefully for decades, nobody hear you. Like, when we were telling them, oh, somebody broke in my brother's house 2 days after they killed him, they put his stuff on the front, and I found this ID, the only ID he had on the front with his stuff. Oh, well, police went down there, but then the gun trade task force came out, and they're like, oh wow, they want shot. Like, it bugs me so bad.
I want us to have more time for questions from everybody. I want to open or ask you about something else. One of these fascinating meditations that you have from the book. So the book, for everybody, this is a book that tells you about how the forensic system works in this country, how it is the infrastructure that allows for and supports and allows for the maintenance of police violence against black and brown people in this country. And it also has important meditations on how can we understand the fate of black, brown, and poor people, and how in a way there is a larger question that extends beyond death in police custody that includes also death from the structures of violence. So I wanna ask you, Terence, about this meditation that you have about Elizabeth Catlett's Invisible Man in Riverside Drive in Harlem. And this is this kind of installation, and you say that you look at it from one side and you see the city of New York, and you look at it from the other side and you see the trees, and you meditate on how this gives you an idea, or gives you ideas about how the invisible man, how the black man exists in this country between a perception of society and a perception of nature. Tell us a little bit more, walk us through this meditation around the invisible man before we open it up for Q&A.
So what I wanted to do in that portion of the book is to try to make sense of what do physicians and doctors see when they're doing an autopsy. Do they see a full life? Do we see a sister, a brother, a daughter, a family, someone who supports the community? Or do they just see a body needing a biological explanation? And as I was grappling with this, Elizabeth Catlett is my great mother-in-law. She's a very noted Black sculptress and artist who's done lots of work about the civil rights struggle and leaders of indigenous Mexican movements around the world. She did this monument in 2006, devoted to, 2001, to Invisible Man. And what it does is this 15-ton monument. And if you stand at the monument and you look in the direction of Harlem, you're going to see streets, people, the city, cars, missions. You're going to see society. You're going to see the things that shape our lives. And I think that's something that we often don't actually think about collectively, and certainly doctors and physicians don't think about this. Usually when we think about someone who's sick, who has mental illness, who's not well, we usually say, that's an isolated individual. They made bad choices. They didn't want to exercise. They didn't want to work out. They didn't want to go see the doctor. What we don't see is we live in a nation where we actually have politicians who are trying to take healthcare away from us. We live in a nation where prescription drugs are too expensive for most people. Well, people have to make a choice. Do I buy the drugs? Do I buy groceries? We live in a nation where people live in food deserts and heat islands with over-policing, not enough access to nutritious foods. What do we think all that stuff is going to do to our bodies? It's going to make us unwell. It's going to make us sick. It's going to make us die early. So who's the cause of that? Is it the person who's stuck in a maze with limited options? Or is it the elected officials? Or the CEOs of pharmaceutical companies? Or the fact that the White House and our sort of leaders in Congress have been bought by these sort of institutions of big pharma and big medicine? And so part of what I'm hoping to do with the book and to have these conversations is to get us to see that we are not individuals in this society. Our ability to live long lives, to live with dignity, to live with health and wellness is determined by the systems that control our lives. This means local officials, local laws, state laws, and federal laws. And it requires us to shift our thinking about what it means to be a vulnerable person in this nation state. We're not alone. The nation is literally inside of our bodies, and we have to have the moral clarity to see it.
Thank you so much, and you do this work in the book. So we have maybe 20, 30 minutes left, so I want to open the floor to everybody.
And
Yeah.
what we will do is I'll come around and hand up. Like I did want to make sure you had flexible time. You had time in case you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to have a conversation with the audience. You have to do it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Then I will be coming around with the mic, and we want to keep our questions and comments relatively truncated, relatively brief, so that we can get a few of them. And obviously, we talked for a half-day seminar and organizing on these things. But I definitely want us to be able to get a few different things in. So I'm going to look for hands right from that, because I saw one here. Just want to give you some.
Yeah, not just to say something real quick for I don't want to leave this on, but it was something deep in the book where I didn't know until I read it in your book about like the police, to pretty much like if it's a biracial person that dies, the police can actually say or determine their race. Could you just share a little bit about that real quick? Because
Sure.
that's so important. That's so important.
Well, the problem with police is that they aren't very good at a lot of things. And one of the things that they're not very good at is seeing the humanity of the people they're supposed to serve and protect. So what that means is that they pull someone over and they can't identify your race. They may leave your race unidentified. And if you're mixed race, or maybe you're racially ambiguous, what that means is that if you die in police custody, your name is going to go on a ledger and we won't know your race. They also don't know how to recognize people's genders either. There are people who are transgender, people who are dying in police custody, and they misremember them. So what that does is it skews the data and the statistics, right? So then you don't really understand how many people who have sort of Middle Eastern backgrounds are actually dying in custody. How many people who actually are white dying in custody, as opposed to someone who appears to be presenting as white, etc. So the problem is that law enforcement are filtering how we think about this issue because they're making snap judgments on the fly about who they're arresting and who they're killing.
Thank you so much. That is a job like everybody needs to hear that. That's real important.
Thank you for raising that. We had no idea. But that is ridiculous. Just go around.
As I see it, with life going on here today, it's what they gonna do, it's what we got to do for ourselves. Say we just stand as one, we won't have that problem.
We would.
We just stand as one.
It's systematic.
And every time you turn around, it's gonna be this and that, this and that. But if we open our eyes and look what we're gonna stand for, as people, as being a human being, we all can stand strong. So, regardless of what the police say, is what we do. If we just help each other out and just stand as one. And like my brother, he got chopped up on the porch. I didn't know my brother was there for 3 months. 3 months. 3 months, man. Every time I go on Papa Road, chopped up on the porch inside the porch. I didn't know he was dead. Until they run that cable clock on the daggone news. And it broke my heart. They done cremated his body and everything. They cremated his body. I don't know who did it or whoever did it. That's why I was sitting there and thinking about. Close your eyes for a minute, everybody. Think about it with your son or your daughter. I've been chopped up in the thing you don't know about the kid in home 3-4 months. You ain't never heard from them. Then that's when they're gonna really hit the gauge then. You're all gonna be so broke when you find out when you're right dead. You know what I'm saying? It's so hard that when the police running around here now, they're looking for a small deal, they ain't looking for a big deal. They look for a small deal. And as soon as you come on with a big deal, they won't act like they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. What they gonna say? You had something to do with that? What you know about that body?
Yeah. No, that's
That's what they gonna do. What you know about that body? That's what your parents did. That's not right.
no, it's not right. And you're saying something that
But it do make sense.
it does. It does. One thing that I want to elevate this brother's point. We often think, especially in a city like Baltimore, right? Black folks are carrying an unequal burden of police violence. That's true. It's happening. Same for Latino folks. Black men and Latino men are the most likely to die in custody. But if you look at the raw numbers, the largest population dying in police custody in America are white men. They're the largest group. We don't talk about police custody violence in that way. We talk about it as always. Black folks dealing with this, or Latinos dealing with this, or poor people dealing with this. Not It's conservatives, Republicans, it's military veterans, it's single moms who are dealing with opioid addiction, it's people who are unhoused, people who are dealing with mental illness. This is not a system that just preys on one of us. It's a system that preys on all of us. And if we actually don't stop the system, then it will be continue to do what it is, which is be unaccountable, misremember us, and do things like cremate and burying people's bodies and not actually tell their families about it.
So thank you. And the question I have is, we're in this era of sort of anti-vax, anti-truth. And so how do we get people who are not a part of these conversations on a regular basis? And what is the entry point for someone who is deeply ignorant of the facts and deeply disengaged from the process of being able to sit down and understand the severity of these institutions and the ongoing harm? And to your point, there are probably people who would benefit from understanding who was harmed, but how, like, what's sort of the entry point that you found?
Yeah, good. Thank you for that question. There are 2 points there. One is if we need to educate ourselves about what's going on in this country when it comes to police violence and understand that it is a collective democratic crisis. There's that part. But the other thing that I think we have to wrap our heads around, right now when we're dealing with inflation, when people don't have jobs that can compete, people can't afford rent, and it's really expensive right now. Gas is really expensive right now. We are being failed at multiple levels by our local, state, and federal officials. But when you look at the victims of police violence, you know what they all have in common, most of them, particularly the nonviolent offenders? They've already been failed by local, state, and federal government.
Mm-hmm.
The way I like to think about it is that each of us in this room right now, under the right circumstances, tragically, are one bad mental health day away from having a violent encounter with one person. And if this system is not real and held accountable, and if the people who are supposed to be telling us the truth about how we're dying in police custody, if we can't rely on them, then we have to turn on ourselves. We have to be able to rely upon us to hold these institutions accountable. But it starts with us realizing we live in a nation with danger and insecurity at every level. And when you live in a nation state that's insecure, when you don't know where you're going to get your next meal, you don't know if you can afford rent, or put your kids to college, or live a life of dignity, that makes you vulnerable to state violence.
Hello, I read Tawanda's copy. So I was struck by how you go through the history of coroners, medical examiners, and all of that, and exposing the fact that, like, what we did, we didn't get his entire record until, meaning the police record, not just the medical examiners, until like 2019 or 2020, something like that. And I like how you put in the book that other people do the same thing, like family members, is like literally pulling out the medical examiner's report and going to a medical dictionary online to find actually what was happening that they were ignoring. And I also appreciate that you cover the deaths in custody. And what came to my mind to ask is, like, not in custody, but like in the jails and in correctional facilities. I have in my mind that there is no Black person alive that would hang themselves. They would never lynch themselves. Like, I feel like in most cases, they were beaten by correctional officers, and then to cover up that, they claim that they hung themselves. But like, I got the impression while reading your book that, like, you were being very careful to not be subjected to conjecture. And you're like kind of leaving it up to the reader to kind of like read between the lines. And I'd like to know what your true feelings about those particular incidents are, because I know you had to keep it like scientific and, you know, not put your own bias into that. But,
Sure, yeah.
yeah,
It's a
so,
good question.
yeah.
I would say that I actually tell in very plain language when I think about all this. You know, I think that there is when you read these stories in this book, you cannot leave those stories the same person. You just can't. And so I have faith in people's ability to look at this violence and look at this death and be changed as a result of it. The stories speak for themselves. They really, really do. Your brother's story speaks for itself. Right? And I think it's really important that we see it that way. And for me, it's not about sort of trying to play both sides or to sort of be scientific. It's just about telling a very human story about a very inhumane system, really.
First of all, thank you both for all of your work that you guys are doing on this topic. I actually had an opportunity to work with Dr. Gill in the lab at UCLA, and to this day, it's probably the most impactful work that I've been a part of. But at the same time, it's very heavy work and heavy having to look into those kinds of things. So my question is, how do you guys stay motivated and avoid burnout when working on these hard topics?
It's a good question. How did you stay motivated and avoid burnout? Because you were there with us in the lab reading these records. What did you do?
Take breaks. Take time for yourself. Like, do things that make you feel good outside of the work, and also just seeing the impact that the work had on people's families and communities, and just also going out in the community and seeing people appreciate that the work that you were doing. I think that's what helped me. But at the same time, I feel like today, there's just so much going on in the world that it's just feeling a little harder lately.
Yeah. I think that's right. There are some really dark moments over the last 5 years doing this work that I found myself in. You know, when you think about death every day, all day, for 5 years, it weighs on you, it weighs on your family, it weighs on your friends. And I found myself often depressed, grappling with nihilism, all these deep, dark things. And then I would think about Helen Jones, whose son, John Horton, was 22 years old and was beaten to death inside the jail. And his death was staged to look like a suicide. And I would say, Helen Jones can wake up every day, organize, canvass, put pressure on local officials. I can do that. I can do this work. Right? I can't imagine having my son taken from me. But Helen had that happen to her. She's been doing this now for almost 2 decades. And so there's a way in which the families that are most impacted by this, to me, are the inspiration. And we would not call any of them if they wanted to burn all this down. But the fact that they're still trying to fight and organize and change this system to be accountable, to me, is the best source of hope and inspiration in staying relevant.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill. I'm one of the people who's active with the West Coalition and the weekly rallies and live streams. And I'm also a communist in the Progressive Labor Party. I'd like to come back to one of the points you made earlier, which I think was very telling. You talked about the number of people who've been executed over the history of the United States, and then pointed out that the police killings are a much larger number. So a similar reality is that if we look back at the period of lynchings during the Jim Crow era, and we compare that to the number of police killings today, even if you account for the fact that the population is larger now, about 4 times more people are killed annually through police murder than were killed from lynchings. And we know, I think there's a fair amount of unanimity on the purpose of lynchings, which was to terrorize people and try to make it very hard to stand up against racism and oppression. And I would argue that that's the role of police today, and then the medical examiners are sort of aiding and abetting that effort. But more generally, I would say that the role of the police is to carry out organized violence for the suppression of a class, and they're the modern terrorists. So I don't really have a question except to ask what you think about that concept.
I think you're right. I think that there is indisputable evidence that, going back to my point earlier, if you look at the people who are dying in custody, there are people who have already been failed by our democracy. There are people who are already outside the reach and protection of our local, state, and federal government. So what that means is that we're using police to erase those people. We're using police to cover up our own failures as a society.
100%.
And so to stop in custody death, it's not just making the medical examiner accountable, it's not just police reform, it's basic things. Giving people institutions of care and not harm, giving people meaningful work, giving people a sense of dignity, giving people a sense of you belong to the collective. And when we don't do that, people get lost in the cracks, and we use the police to clean up the mess.
Usually the police create the mess.
Activists here in Baltimore. A couple of years ago, when Mayor Pugh was in office, we tore down statues of racial institutions. And I gave a speech and I said that we not only have to take down the statues, but we need to go after the institutions of racism. Now, policing in America came into conception after slavery. If you look at Birth of a Nation, 1925, we relived 1925 and 2025. You just changed the color of the person you killed. I don't read, so I can't say I read the book. I'm not going to sit here and, commit a fraud. But I'm a part of what you're talking about. I done been to jail. I'm a prisoner's right advocate. And to that person that said that we don't lynch people and we don't hang ourselves in jail, sometimes we do. We hang ourselves because we can't deal with what's going on in there.
Not all the time.
We commit acts of violence that y'all don't even want to think about out here. All right, we're barbaric. All right, I survived that. Out here and I try to educate people about it. Racism is a learned behavior. It's not something that you born into. It's taught to you. You're taught racism. Love is something that you were born with. All right. Got too many self-serving living guys, but a lot of conversations and no work.
Sure, yeah. But we do have Tawandas, and we do have Carmen Johnson and Helen Jones.
I understand that part, but we in silos.
Sometimes
we work better together.
Sometimes Carmen Johnson has been working with people in Los Angeles, and people in Los Angeles have been working with Carmen Johnson here in Maryland.
We've been dying since the mid-year.
That's true.
We've still been dying.
Yeah.
And we're permitting this. We're not permitting this, we're victims of this.
I agree.
We are not permitting this. We're not doing this as a willing participant.
For sure. I would say to your point, the systems designed to kill and maim and dismember Black people have evolved to do this to everybody.
It was by design, by culture, by design.
Which is why we gotta fight it collectively.
Yep.
I see 4 hands, 3 hands, I see 3 hands, very briefly, very briefly.
I'm very surprised that you said that statistically there's more people with an origin who has been killed by the police. Very surprised because we live in a world where news is very censored. So I guess around the United States, they probably hear a lot more about black crime, especially once it makes major news. But we never, ever really hear about the police are doing to other brothers and sisters who live who's a different color, who lives in the Appalachian Mountains or something. We don't ever hear about that. So I'm just really worried about that.
Maybe we can get a couple of questions at the same time so that there's time for people who want to both sides.
So I'm also connected to the West Coalition, but one of my questions is, the information in this book, I now have to absolutely read it, I haven't read it yet. One of the questions I have is, in Maryland, because the Office of Medical Examiner had an audit connected to the Attorney General's office, and we're trying to see if anything's going to happen, but nothing is happening yet. They determined that a number of folks, including Tyrone, should have had their method, the death certificate should have been different. It should have said homicide, but it didn't. Have any of our officials and politicians in this state and in this city taken a look at your book? Have you been able to have any conversations? And what do you need in order for that to happen? I think we need to light a fire under them because they're not doing anything next. And I think it sounds like the information that you have and coming from academia in some ways is unfortunately a way to use privilege to get them to pay attention. And I'm wondering if you've had any conversations.
This piggybacks really nicely because my question was, if there's one thing that everyone here could do in the next 24 hours, what would that one thing be to kind of further the effort that you're working on?
In addition to reading this book. That what I would say the first thing.
So I'll start with this comment about white men dying in custody, but it's something we don't talk about in the media. The question we should ask ourselves is, why is that? And to go to this brother's point a little bit earlier, racism in this country was designed to divide us so that the ruling majority, the 1%, the people who control most of our lives, can continue operating without worrying about the people organizing. So if we can collectively understand this as a problem that we are all embedded in, then that changes where the power lies. There's more of us than there are of the people who are upholding the system. To the question about elected officials, we're working on that. We're working on getting us in front of elected officials. A few years ago, I worked with Sister Carmen Johnson here to write the Death and Custody Reporting Act for the state of Maryland. It was a bill that actually was signed into law. Senator Joanna Benson was behind this bill. Carmen Johnson was really the political force of nature to make this happen by canvassing all of the delegates in the House and the Senate. And I'll let Carmen speak for herself, but one thing that happened when we were canvassing these elected officials, we said to us time and time again, they were ashamed, they weren't aware this was happening, and if they weren't aware this was happening, they felt a sense of, we've got to do something about it. Now, that made us feel motivated in some ways, but when our bill made it out of the House, it was completely
Watered down.
changed.
Yep, watered it down.
And
That's
it was
what they
about the
do.
way to continue the system to persist.
That's what they do.
as is, which you all are living in the state, you've seen this happen a dozen times. Last question, what to do? I think if there is a problem specific to this issue or any other related issue that I spoke about, affordable housing, access to healthcare, livable wages, access to less prescription drugs and more competent medical care, I assure you there is a local organization that's already doing the work. So find out where that organization is and start working, start volunteering. Like, I mean that, right? It's not, we don't have to like invent the solutions. People who are already been impacted by these issues know what needs to be done. And they've been organizing for a long time. They just need more folks like us to show up to the rallies and to the protests and to the petitions for certain bills, right? This democracy is a participatory sport, right? And if we don't participate, we see what happens. We see who's in the White House right now.
There are so many dots that you're connecting. I mean, there's so many threads that you are tying together, and I appreciate the way you frame that to do just that, to put the overt and the overtly stupid into its macro context, and shining a light on some of the more overtly stupid that we don't even think about lightly. I listen to you, and if it weren't for what we're talking about, it would be amusing to hear what is apparently the easy fallback excuse of heart condition, because that also was the convenient excuse in the tasing death of my nephew in Frederick, Maryland in 2007. And I did not know how widespread this whole easy fallback of old bad heart was, which makes it even more stupid and overtly silly and overtly a lie. But you have been able to bring those obvious things together and put it in this more macro context in terms of transformation of society. So I know I'm going to very much enjoy putting this book in many people's hands in the coming days over in the bookstore. I'm going to enjoy putting it in your hands in a couple minutes when you come over to the table and get it. If you're paying with a card, if you need to pay with cash, hold with us for a few minutes, because when I reopen the bookstore in a little bit after we adjourn, we'll be able to take care of it via cash there. The hospital is closed off. Do make sure to take a dessert or a drink home from the cold case. Do be sure to go to WestWednesday.org and go to the events page to see all of the things that are coming up. So many important things. Again, plenty of things that are going to dovetail with tonight's conversation. Ahmed, thank you so much for leading our conversation, bringing your expertise. Of course, you're always welcome. While I think you already know, this is your home, so you need not but ask and come on to share. There's always your power. Dennis, thank you for writing this. Get this to everybody. Please go out and tell the world, as you say, as Ahmed said, everybody needs to have this book. So we appreciate you coming around this way back from UCLA to do this, and we wish you the best of luck. And as I say in my poem for Jarrell, no voltage shall leave our minds, so days our souls so days we accept this shit is just an unfortunate phase. This is going to be a powerful tool in our fight back. One more big Red Evans round of applause for Ahmed. Thank you.